Horizon Gen, some TierZoo reaction. This is when Earth was in beta by the channel TierZoo. I guess it's gonna talk about the early times when the life, I guess, first appeared, multi-cell life, I guess. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. I've got quite a few TierZoo videos already. If you haven't seen them, check out the cards, the playlist, check out for it, TierZoo reaction. Upload lots of videos in 24 hours, so you might not have got a notification for some videos. Check out the playlist, it's all there. Check out the playlist too, like Oli Sarcastic Production, Internet Historian, History, CGP Grey, and yeah, let's do this one.
This video was made in partnership with CuriosityStream. Every game goes through a development process, and Outside is no exception. During the game's early access alpha stage, it was mostly just a chemistry simulator. There wasn't too much interesting content, and you could only play as single-cell builds at the time. Once the devs finished work on the first multicellular classes, the game started to pick up some steam. They released an open beta for the game, which received so much attention in such a short time that it became known as the Cambrian Explosion.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about the meta during Earth's beta.
Yeah, Cambrian Explosion. I think it took over, I guess still in, I guess large enough time span, but overall considering in the in the sense we are talking about here, in the basically 500 or so million years ago, I think, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. But it took place in such a short time compared to that it was considered an explosion. I think there was a massive amount of oxygen that played role in it or something like that. I don't know much details about that, but that was just sudden thing that happened, so that's why it's called Cambrian Explosion.
And also discuss the most important abilities and stats at that time. So, during the Cambrian meta, the devs hadn't released the terrestrial expansion pack yet, so at the time, gameplay took place entirely within the marine biome. There also wasn't much in the way of mobility, intelligence, or stealth yet, as those stats weren't considered very useful by the player base until more advanced techniques were discovered. This doesn't mean there wasn't a bunch of diverse builds to choose from though, not at all. The Cambrian meta was dominated by arthropod builds. Arthropods had two perks that gave them a huge early lead in the story of Earth's metagame. The first was an exoskeleton. Offensive strategies weren't too advanced at the time, so all you needed in order to shrug off most attacks was decent armor. The second thing is that arthropods were among the first builds to unlock more advanced eyes. Most players had simple, light-sensitive eyes during the Cambrian, but compound eyes granted crucial accuracy bonuses, the best in the game until camera-style eyes were unlocked later. One of the most popular arthropod builds at the time was the trilobite. It didn't have anything too spectacular about it in terms of abilities, but it was very easy to play, making it a great beginner pick at a time where just about everyone was a beginner at the game. It had solid defensive stats because of its thick carapace armor, making it very difficult to deal damage to. Players did eventually learn how to get past their defenses though, and at that point, trilobites dropped in viability. I'd place them in low C tier. The meta during—
Damn, they look really, cockroach type of bug type creatures, huh? Yeah, but spend your skills on defense and HP, and I guess you'll be fine. Yeah, clearly, any other bug that has somewhat intelligence can figure things out, like, what is the weak point, I guess.
During the Cambrian Explosion advanced so rapidly that the truly low-tier builds weren't around long enough to be remembered, so they really aren't worth talking about. Next up on the tier list is Hallucigenia, one of the few builds that wasn't running a tough carapace shell as part of its build. Instead, Hallucigenia players opted for a different type of defense.
That is creepy.
Spikes. Spikes are the perfect defense against tough, armored opponents, because focusing all of your force into a single point can often be enough to pierce armor, even when your character is relatively weak otherwise. This is why piercing-type weapons dominate the insect meta today. Slash and crush-type weapons would easily be thwarted by chitin armor, but piercing damage is super effective. Anyways, even though this is a great strategy, Hallucigenia wasn't really any sort of threat and could be easily ignored by other players due to its small size and low mobility, so it's only in high C tier.
That's like a horror thing, that Hallucigenia thing. The way the spikes are, it just ugh.
While this build did eventually fall out of the meta, a non-spiked version of it is still run by some loyal Velvet Worm mains today, and this build even has a projectile attack. In B tier we have one of my personal favorite ancient builds, Opabinia. Opabinia was one of the first grappler builds to find any significant success in the game, and it's no surprise why. The meta at the time was heavily defense-based, and grapplers are always perfectly suited to dealing damage to a blocking opponent. The key to its success was its trunk, an attribute seen surprisingly few times across all the different expansions that have come and gone. Opabinia's trunk gave it an excellent grab with extended
I like the elephant clip, man. You know, grabbing it
across
like
all the different expansions.
grabbing it at the neck like that. Ah, this is ostrich.
Come and gone.
This is like, come your pencil neck.
Opabinia's trunk gave it an excellent grab with extended range, making it perfect for grabbing smaller players and preventing their escape in spite of their heavy armor. It also had excellent perception skills because it spec'd into compound eyes, with 5 eyes giving it full 360-degree vision. With
Damn.
that said, its mobility wasn't stellar and it had little in terms of defense, so it had basically no options if a player from a higher weight class attacked
Yeah, what was the point of 5 eyes then? That's an overkill.
it. Unfortunately, after they suffered heavy losses and started to fall out of the meta, Opabinia mains started to spec into heavier defenses to compensate, and just kept doubling down until they'd sacrificed size, power, and uniqueness in order to become some of the most resilient, yet useless low tiers in the whole game, tardigrades. So
What?
B tier is as high as Opabinia ever got.
Man, TierZoo really hates tardigrades, right? I saw the video on tardigrade. He just really hates that thing. You know, I think I don't understand that. I mean, tardigrade is one of the most resilient thing that is, I guess. It even survives when it's dead, I guess. If it's dead, you pour water on it, it comes back alive, I guess, something like that. They are even on the moon somewhere, and they come back and they're still alive after going there. So, yeah.
In A tier, we have the only mobility-based build that existed during the Cambrian, Haikouichthys. Haikouichthys was the first fish the devs ever added to the game, and it offered a lot of advantages over its arthropod competitors. Instead of compound eyes, which could see in all directions, Haikouichthys had the first camera-type eyes, which didn't have 360-degree vision, but in exchange were better at focusing, letting them see through camouflage and track targets more effectively. In addition to their eyes, their internal skeleton gave them much more flexibility than builds with an exoskeleton had, allowing them to change directions faster to evade attacks. Haikouichthys was extremely small, putting it barely outside the microscopic weight class. However, the potential of this build only improved from here. Fish have been a meta staple in literally every single expansion, and it all started here. While they weren't top tier yet, they gained top tier status pretty quickly after the game released. This build's potential could not be overestimated, especially considering that a future fish build eventually unlocked the legs attribute and was able to enter the terrestrial servers.
Yeah.
But in the Cambrian, they were no match for the top tier, Anomalocaris. The Anomalocaris build was the first in the game's history to achieve top tier status. Nothing
What?
could match its power and defense at the time. It could deflect just about
Oh,
any attack
that
thrown
thing.
at it because of its armor, while at the same time having a strong enough power stat to crack most other players' armor. If it couldn't crack their armor, it could use its tendrils to grab or flip its opponent, allowing it to attack their weak point for massive damage. Its only real threat was other
So I guess technically only creature that has things that could be considered like arms, which I can use, I guess. So yeah, it would make sense. It would be at S tier.
Anomalocaris players, because they could hit hard enough to crack their armor. Anomalocaris also had the most advanced compound eyes of any build at the time, rivaling that of present-day dragonflies. This gave them an edge when other players finally started speccing into stealth abilities. Anomalocaris was such an oppressive force that it ended up getting banned in the game's very first balance patch, which opened up several new niches and allowed fish, mollusks, and other arthropods to diversify their strategies. So yeah, that's what Earth's meta looked like during the open beta. The meta progressed quite rapidly after that, with the devs adding the terrestrial DLC and with various players unlocking crazy new OP abilities like flight. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes discussing the broken
Alright, is it just me or this early Cambrian time, all these creatures feels really, I guess, fictional. They are not, but it feels like that. If somebody just told you this, you would think like, is this real? Or is this from some kind of movie? Because any other time you saw any animals or anything from that period, you see that like, yeah, I could see that. But this, just all these bugs and different kind of that also the spiky thing, you think like, is this some kind of a fiction? Or is this real? Look at that. That was actually the proper early animals. So that is something. Alright people, that was when Earth was in beta. If you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction I did this link in the description. Check out the cast, please check out the end cards, and I'll see you next time.